This hourly segment is brought to you by Goldilocks, offering smart security systems to homes and businesses. Call Goldilocks at 708-889-5600.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. So over the weekend, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Mike Walls, were making the rounds on the talk shows, making the case for the United States' interest in Greenland, interested in acquiring, not just renting, as has been the position Trump has taken. Mike Walls on the need.
If you look at Denmark's defense expenditures, they have zero heavy icebreakers. They really have no Navy in the Western Hemisphere to speak of, and they certainly aren't contributing in a meaningful way to the Golden Dome, space, or other types of missile defense we have to have. Meanwhile, look at Russia with over 60 icebreakers, some nuclear. The Chinese are building more. They're pushing up into the natural resources that are up there, that are increasingly exposed in the polar regions. We have to secure the United States. The Greenlanders will be better for it, and our alliance will be better for it.
And Walls continued saying this approach is thinking both about the past as well as the future.
It's looking forward and the future threats that we do see rising, both from all of our adversaries, but also it's about looking back. This area, this region was completely ignored by both NATO and Denmark, who is a great ally otherwise, but just doesn't have the resources or the capacity to do what needs to be done in the northern region. And to the to the Democrats who say, well, they're giving you full access. Look, everybody knows that if you are renting a place or a home, you treat it differently than if you own it.
Yeah.
And from a standpoint of international law, President Trump is trying to make a deal, as President Truman tried to do in the 40s, as we did with the Virgin Islands, which we purchased from Denmark for $25 million in the 20th century. So there's nothing wrong with that, and he's doing what needs to be done.
Now, there's another aspect to this that I was not aware of until I read a piece by our next guest. It's also home to the most important data in the world. So writes David Whitehouse, former BBC science correspondent and science editor, author of several books, including Apollo 11, The Inside Story. David Whitehouse, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
The most important data in the world resides in a base in Greenland, you say?
Well, that and in the high Arctic. The base in Greenland, formerly called Thule, is a tracking station operated by the United States military. It's there by permission of Denmark. It's got a Danish flag flying over the base. And Greenland is the ideal location to track ballistic missiles launched on the Russian Kola Peninsula. They approach mainland USA from that direction. And they have a very... It's quite an old radar now, but it's very capable to actually look at that area when they are alerted by satellites which detect the infrared glow from a launch. They immediately lock onto it and determine its trajectory and its intent. So the base there, which is much smaller than it used to be, is a vital part of warning of Russian aggression and any Russian launch, which you have to find out about. But not only Greenland, but also another territory 1,000 kilometers north of Norway called Svalbard, which is the most important satellite communication station on Earth, because it deals with polar satellites, and as they converge in their orbits across the pole, across Greenland and Svalbard, it's an ideal place for download and uplink. So the Arctic is not just minerals, it's not just oil, it's also, as you say, the most important data in the world.
Well, and Svalbard, as you write, there's a complication there that, unbeknownst to me, until as I said, I read your piece, which is this deal that goes back to 1920, a treaty between Norway and Russia that certainly the United States intelligence and military is aware of, and perhaps as the source of one of the concerns about renting versus owning Greenland.
Well, Svalbard is, as you say, from the 1920 agreement, the treaty, is Norwegian territory. But Russia has the right to put settlements there. And indeed, signatories of the Svalbard Treaty, and I think there are some 17 to 20 signatories, including the United States, most of Europe, Australia, Japan, New Zealand, they have the right to live there and settle there without visas. So it's an international community, and military activity is limited, though not completely banned. And the Russians do have a base there, ostensibly a coal mining base, but it's loss making. It doesn't do a great deal. It's there for a presence. And of course, we all know that Russia is very adept, very keen on cyber stalking, on infiltrating the cyber structure of the West. And if it's in a base which is right next door to the world's biggest satellite receiving station, suspicions are aroused as to what actually is it doing there, even though it's there legally.
And we're only a couple of years removed from a military-style parade in Russian settlements in Svalbard.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, so it's just this idea that there is, real connection to the motherland, and whatever the black letter was in that 1920 treaty doesn't mean that it is something that is particularly important to be abided in the mind of President Putin.
Well, I think you're quite right there. There is an interpretation as to what's going on in the last few years, is that as Svalbard and the high Arctic in general is becoming more interesting and important strategically, that Russia is pushing at the edges. It's pushing the envelope of the treaty. It's trying also to put the other nations in a difficult position. So perhaps it is trying to maneuver itself into somehow being the defender of the Svalbard Treaty, which it could possibly make a move on. But it's unlikely to be significant military activity there because it is so remote and so difficult to get to that it would make sending troops to Ukraine, look very easy indeed. This is a very difficult, distant, inhospitable place. Russia's Northern Fleet is not as extensive as many people think, and it's a long supply lines, difficult to live in. So who knows what they're going to do, but certainly the cyber attack on all this data is something that is considerably easier than putting boots on the ground.
Well, that's where I was going. So what they can do is disrupt what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And
they can. Yeah.
And that's not immaterial.
Oh, certainly not. As we've said, it's the most important data in the world. This, because it's in high Arctic and because from polar satellites, which polar satellites are the only satellites that can fly over every square inch of the globe, and their orbits converge over the poles, so you communicate with them more effectively in polar regions, uplink, downlink. Mostly this is scientific information from scientific satellites. But scientific information is also dual use in terms of military. For instance, the weather forecast and the internet traffic over the Ukraine and Russia is very important militarily. But there are, in the high Arctic, in other areas of Norway, military bases being built with the cooperation of the United States, which are military oriented, and disrupting this data, which also includes internet shopping data, would be very serious. I mean, clearly Russia wants to investigate this. There have been unexplained, mysterious cuttings of the data cable between Svalbard and northern Norway, and indeed also in the Baltic, which Russia has denied. But when you look at the data and you find that there was a Russian trawler which spent several weeks and passed over the precise location of the cut 20 times, you know what is going on. We have workarounds, but clearly this is a source of tension, of conflict, the direction of which we do not know where it's going.
Seems to me like these are the kinds of things that Trump and his team should be articulating publicly as well to generate greater understanding of the value here as well as the threat if we don't if the United States does not have control of Greenland.
Well, yes, this is just as important. The data that's received in these high Arctic latitudes is extremely important. Although personally, I think it's apart from the fact of ownership, Trump has got everything he wants from Denmark and can have everything he wants from northern Norway outside the demilitarization zone of Svalbard. They will put as many bases, they will upgrade their technology, they will cooperate as much and increase their spending on defense as a result of what Trump has said about European defense spending overall. So there is a route to a good future here where we take into account this aggression and the incursions and observe what might happen without having to own the territory in which you land on. And certainly talking about Greenland is one thing. If President Trump wanted to move on Svalbard, then that is a direct confrontation with Russia.
Interesting. And so, what is your handle on NATO's reflexive recalcitrance on this, such that they'll endure tariffs and they'll call for summits and make statements of solidarity and so forth? Is this just them feeling like they can't look to be genuflecting before Trump? They have to at least feign a spine when it comes to Trump's demands?
Well, I'm not a defense expert, but I have many contacts in this world. Certainly, everybody's bowled for six, to use an English expression by Trump. People do not know how to read Trump as to how much is rhetoric, how much is to demand attention, how much is to shock, and then settle for something a few steps back from what he claims. What is the negotiation? What is the reality? NATO and governments in general do not know how to deal with this. So the response has been very interesting. First of all, Trump is extremely right in saying that Europe has piggybacked off America for far too long and we ought to pay more for our defense. But also there are people thinking that, well, how long can Trump stay in command? Trump is a year into his final 4-year terms. We all know that as your end of term approaches, your power declines because you are no longer the future and people look towards the future. So there's a bit of hedging, I gather, of wanting to deal with what Trump says substantially. And also a little bit of foot dragging because they don't know exactly what the future will bring and which direction Trump is going. But I think it's unanimous over here that nobody wants to sell Greenland.
Is it something perhaps also less redeemable afoot, and that is, been very difficult to get Western Europe to stop buying oil and gas from Russia.
Yes.
You have Mark Carney in Canada doing a complete 180 on China. Is it also that these Western European leaders, while they're standing up to Trump, so they say, or so they portend, that they're also playing footsie with Putin and Xi?
Yeah, this is the hard political reality, isn't it? Because you need energy, and Europe has completely messed up its energy policy, its energy supply by going down the net zero route. Look what Germany has done with its energy supplies by closing down nuclear reactors and closing down gas-fired power stations so much. It has made its energy expensive. It has made its economy uncooperative. Britain is going exactly in the same direction. And for what oil and gas it does have, it's relied on Putin. So it has to change that. And this change 20 years of environmental campaigning has got Germany and Britain into this process. It's going to be many years to come out. I mean, Norway is a savior in this response because Norway's got access to so much oil. Britain has got access to shale gas, which it refuses to get out of the ground. So you're quite right. The oil and the gas, which keeps the wheels turning of our civilization, where you get it from is a vital factor in this. And Putin, you could argue that aside from its nuclear missiles, Putin's only great card, if you like, is his oil, is his energy, his gas. It's a small superpower in many respects. Its economy is, I think, less than that of Texas. It is increasingly have economic problems, and the population are dissatisfied with what's happening in Ukraine. So yes, threats of strategic strikes and control of its energy supply are his main cards. And so Europe is in this position where it has got Trump on one hand saying one thing, it's got the economic realities of keeping the lights on with energy from the other direction, and it has to find a lot more money to spend on defense. These are difficult times.
David Whitehouse, former BBC science correspondent and science editor, author of several books, including Apollo 11, The Inside Story. David Whitehouse, thanks so much for joining us. Very interesting take on this. Very helpful. And I'm Dan Propp, Chicago's Morning Answer.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer. Gain insight into building strong marriages and raising godly children with Focus on the Family with Jim Daly each weekday at 11:30 a.m. on our sister station, AM 1160, Hope for Your Life. AM 560, The Answer.